Hi, my name is Christina Crennan, and today we're going to be talking about Piaget's theory of child and adolescent development. A quick background on John Piaget: he lived from 1896 to 1980, and he was a Swiss developmental psychologist. He did a lot of research and came up with these theories, and we're going to go through it step by step. There are 4 stages to his theories. The first is the sensory motor stage. The second is the pre-operational stage. The third is the concrete operational stage. And the fourth is the formal operational stage. And as you can briefly see in this flowchart, these are the ages at which these stages develop. We're going to go through it one by one. First stage is the sensory motor stage. So this happens from about 0 to 2 years old. Children begin relating the world around them to both sensory and motor developments. Towards the end of this stage, they're going to start matching symbols with objects, but in the beginning, they are not quite able to do that. And there's 6 substages to this, and we're going to talk about all 6. The first substage is symbol reflexes. So from 0 to about 1 month old, infants are focused on very simple reflexes like sucking, and that's about all they know how to do. They're very internalized. They don't understand that there's a world beyond their self. The second substage is from 1 to about 4 months old, and this is the first habits, and we're creating primary circular reactions. So a baby might do something by accident and then repeat it, for example, sucking on their thumb. They'll accidentally do it, realize that it's a reflex that works for them, and then continue to do so. The third substage is secondary circular reactions. This occurs from 4 to about 8 months. And this is where they're starting to become more object-oriented. So, for example, a baby may accidentally shake a rattle, and it will like the sound that that rattle makes, so it will continue to shake that rattle. So not only is it reacting to things within itself, but now it's starting to react to objects around it. The fourth substage is the coordination of secondary circular reactions. This occurs from 8 to about 12 months. They're going to start to combine the way that they do things. For example, they maybe in the past would have just been able to grab something or reach for something. In this stage, they're going to develop the ability to grab an object and use that object to reach for a second object. So they're combining the schema. The fifth substage is tertiary circular reactions. They're going to start exploring the possibilities of all the objects around them. This is 12 to about 18 months. They're really going to start exploring objects and things around them. They're going to develop the ability to know that when you have an object and you take it away, that object is still there. It still exists. So they're going to understand that just because an object disappears doesn't mean that it no longer exists. And the 6th substage is the internalization of all this schemata, where they're fully understanding it. When they reach that point, that's when we hit the pre-operational stage. This occurs in children from 2 to about 7 years old. These numbers are approximate, but these are the numbers that Piaget came up with. They begin to grasp language and truly can start to communicate using a language. They're very prone to fantasy in this stage. They will hold perspectives. They're still orientated to themselves. They're still worried about themselves and not so much about the world around them. They will not be able to understand the concept of conservation. So conservation briefly, for example, if you give a child 2 glasses with 2 equal amounts of water, and you ask them, are these glasses equal? They will say, yes, those glasses are equal. You can take 1 glass with that same amount of water and pour it into a different size container. And then ask the child again, are those glasses, do they have the same amount of water? And the child will say, no, this one's bigger because it looks bigger, it's visually bigger to them. They can't understand that because you took 1 amount of water and simply moved it from 1 container to another, the amount of water was conserved. At this stage, they are not understanding that concept. Another example of conservation is if you put 5 coins in a row and you made 2 rows of coins. And you ask, do these have the same number? And they'll say yes, because the rows are the same size. spread one of the rows out and say, okay, which row has more coins? And although the child has the ability to count the coins, visually, one row will look larger, and that child will answer that the larger row has more amounts of coins. This is that the idea is that objects are undergoing a physical change, so it's just changing the way that they look, and children can't understand that although the visual appearance is changing, the amount of that object has been conserved. When students or children begin to understand this concept, they will have moved on into the third stage, which is the concrete operational stage. This occurs from about 7 to 11 years. A couple material I read said 13, but mostly I found 11. These children are beginning to understand abstract ideas and thought. They're capable of reasoning. They can reason with you that there was X amount of water in a cup, you moved it to a different cup, the amount of water did not change. They can reason that. They're understanding the concept of conservation. They're starting to see the world, not just from their self point of view, but the world around them as well. After this stage, we move into the formal operational stage. This occurs from 11 to 13 upwards, so adolescence into adulthood. They have complete comprehension, and they are also able to think hypothetically. One example that I saw is they were comparing two students. One was in the concrete operational stage, and the other was in the formal operational stage. The student in the concrete operational stage was asked what would happen if people didn't have thumbs. And their response was, well, we'd have 4 fingers. Well, yes, that is absolutely correct. But we're not quite yet able to think hypothetically. Where the student who had reached the formal operational stage was able to say, yes, we would have 4 fingers, but I had a friend who was left-handed. And they described to me how the world is based around right-handed people. How desks are made with ledges for right-handed people, the way that we write is for right-handed people. Everything we do is for right-handed people. The computer mouse. And he, for about a week he observed the world and realized, yes, the world is made for right-handed people because the majority of the world is right-handed. If the majority of the world didn't have thumbs, then the way the whole world was would change. Because everything that we do with our thumbs, nobody would be able to do anymore. And he was able to hypothetically think, how would the entire world change just by people not having thumbs? By being able to express those thoughts, he showed that he had moved into the formal operational stage of development. So, there's 3 questions that I have. The first being, do you believe that children can be taught to progress through these stages faster? Do you believe there's exercises we can do to help students understand and reason and move through these stages faster than they should? Is there ways in your classroom that you can help them do this? My second question is, how can you organize your classroom if you have students that are in 2 different stages? So if you're teaching 7-year-olds, and so you're going to have some in the pre-operational stage and some in the concrete operational stage. How can you formulate your classroom to accommodate both of these kinds of students? What type of differentiated instruction will you use? How will you be able to make sure that everybody is getting the learning that they need and that no one is so far ahead that they're bored and they're waiting for the rest of the class to catch up? How can you assure that you can teach children in both stages at the same time? And lastly, if you have a student who doesn't seem to have quite reached a stage of development, who maybe is lacking, say you teach a high school student who isn't quite able to think hypothetically and they're not at that point, how can you encourage them along? What sort of activities, what sort of projects or assignments can you give them to reinforce the ideas that they have not yet been able to grasp? Can you even do that? Can you teach a high school student to think hypothetically if they don't know how? If they haven't reached, even though they should have reached that stage in child development? The biggest question here is, how do we make sure that students are progressing along the way that they should? How do we make sure that they're reaching the milestones that they should? How do we know that students are grasping these concepts in the timely manner that they should be able to? And is that something that we can even address? Thank you.